Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are making it a great day. I am Brian, the life changer, and you are about to have your life changed. Whether you're having a bad day, a good day, or maybe you're just starting your day. My passion is to have a positive impact in your life. This podcast is called Unlock the Power of Your Mind. It is designed to help you harness your inner greatness and inspire you to be the best version of you possible. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope this helps to change your life. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining me for another episode of Unlock the Power of Your Mind. Today, I am super excited to have a health and wellness professional with me who is forward-thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be able to take a lot from this interview. Dr. Adeel Khan is a medical doctor and a certified personal trainer. He works as a sports physician at Gallia Clinic. He specializes in weight training injuries as well as regenerative medicine. He's worked with celebrities and top-level professional athletes. He also runs his own weight loss program called Fitness MD Canada to help patients develop a healthy relationship with food and their bodies. As far as fitness goes, ladies and gentlemen, he is a natural power lifter. I don't know how much he weighs, but he can squat 405. And regardless of how much you weigh, that is pretty darn impressive. So, Dr. Khan, thank you so very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
I saw your video on IG of you squatting 405 all the way down to the ground. That is very impressive, regardless of how much you weigh. But out of curiosity, how much do you weigh?
I'm about 185.
Woo! All right.
So, yeah, it took many years of hard work.
Yeah, people don't always realize all of the work that leads up to that when they see the highlight reel of IG. But the reason that I highlight that for the listeners is because I think that there's another level of respect that people have for health and wellness professionals that also truly embody and practice what they preach. And I know that you do that, Dr. Khan. So I respect you very much for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I believe in too. Is, if you're going to take advice from someone about health, they should embody that as well.
So I'm going to ask you the first question that I ask every guest on the show, which is describe who Dr. Khan is as a human being in a couple sentences or less.
Well, I think you kind of summed it up pretty well in the intro. I mean, professionally, I'm a person who values and believes that everyone deserves to be like the healthiest and best version of themselves. So that's kind of what my mission is as a person. So I do that both professionally as in the sports clinic and my weight loss with patients, but also, I mean, as a person, as I am with, my friends and family, I always try to help people in terms of not only health, but just trying to make their, with anything I can help with. And that's a big reason why I went into medicine, is because just trying to make people's lives better, but also I think nowadays it's not just about not being sick, but really about optimal health and how you can live the best quality of life longest. Because a lot of people, especially with medicine now, people are able to live longer, but the quality of life really deteriorates as they get older. And my big interest really was, how can we keep people healthier longer? And that's really how I got into the health and wellness scene.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said in the intro, Dr. Khan, there's going to be a lot of different types of people that are going to be able to gain knowledge and actionable strategies from Dr. Khan today. One of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on, Dr. Khan, was because of the fact that you work with the average everyday person, as well as elite level bodybuilders and athletes and those stepping up on stage. It takes a certain kind of individual to be able to really work both ends of the spectrum and to be able to connect with people that may be at very different points as far as maybe what their wellness goals are. And so I'm really, really excited to dive into this. But first, share a little bit about your early childhood and what it was like growing up for you. Did you grow up in a family of doctors? What got you into the field?
No, so my parents are immigrants from Pakistan, and with a lot of immigrant families, they don't have too much growing up. So we were pretty minimal in terms of extracurriculars and all that stuff. So it was really, it was a good childhood, obviously, in terms of being able to. I had a lot of family and people around here, but it wasn't someone in my family who motivated me to go into medicine. It was actually really because of the fitness interest I had. And the fitness interest, I think, just for a lot of people, when you're 18 years old, you just start off, you just want to look better, you want to feel better about yourself. So that's kind of how you get into it. But then when you really start getting into fitness, or at least for me, and I think if you talk to a lot of bodybuilders too, they'll tell you it's more than just looking good. It's really develops yourself mentally, and you learn to develop yourself mentally, becoming stronger, and you learn to perform under pressure. Because for example, when you are squatting max weight, if you're not focused, that weight, you can hurt yourself, you can get crushed mentally and physically. So you really have to learn to do that. And so for me, when I got into fitness, that's really when I realized the impact that can have on people's health. And from there is really where because I was doing science in university, so that's kind of how I got interested into medicine too.
Awesome.
But for me, I knew right away that I didn't want to go into a surgical specialty or something where it's more of a reactive model, where you're waiting for people to get these problems and then you're intervening later. So for me, a big part is trying about preventative health, which is where I think why I'm so keen on running my weight loss program, because you make people healthier, obviously, through losing weight, but also when they learn to eat properly and move properly, manage their stress, as well as learning to sleep properly and get all the lifestyle pillars down, then that's really when they become healthier. And that's what really leads to long-term health.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I love that you touched on that. I think that's a good starting point for us, which is, we are living longer, and yet, at least I know here in the United States, childhood obesity is going through the roof. Adult obesity is going through the roof. Type 2 diabetes is higher now than ever. There's more gyms opening up across the country, yet as a society, we continue to get more and more out of shape. So let's say it's somebody that's listening to this podcast. We're coming up on the first of the year. They say this is going to be their year and they're going to make some changes. What would you recommend are some of the pillars of overall health and wellness for the average person? And what would be some good starting points upon which they can build just an overall health and wellness foundation?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to establish really is looking at the mental aspect of it, because people get, we see this all the time, and I see it all the time in my weight loss program too, is people get, they're, especially with the New Year's, they say, okay, I'm going to lose, 50 pounds. I'm going to start going to the gym 3 days a week. I'm going to start, no more carbs. Like, I'm going to start doing all these things. And essentially they set themselves up for failure because they're trying to do too much at once. And the other thing too is, from a mental perspective too, you have to ask yourself, why you're really doing this and why is it important to you? So before you even get into the strategies about how to do it, you need to first ask yourself why you're doing this. And from a mental perspective, do you have an emotionally strong enough reason, as well as having mental strategies to help deal with obstacles as they come up? So for example, one of the big things that I do with my patients, and that I think a lot of people would find useful, is something called tiny habit change. So instead of trying to do too much at once, you would try to just do a little bit. So for example, if you're going from being a sedentary person who hasn't worked out for the last 6 months, but you want to start working out in the new year, don't say you're going to start going to the gym 6 times a week and you're going to cut out carbs and all this. Just try to make one little change and then go from there. So you could say, okay, I'm just going to go to the gym for 5 minutes today, go on the bike for 5 minutes, or move for 5 minutes, and that's it, and done. And oftentimes you might end up doing more than 5 minutes, but just getting that inertia, over that inertia of just going to the gym and doing something is really what helps people. And then the next day, you add a few minutes, and then, you go from there kind of thing. And really, that's what I find is really helpful for people, just to get started, because I just find too much people set themselves, it's the mental stuff people forget about, and they focus in on the strategy, on like, ketogenic, which program's best, and all these strategies, which is fine, but you have to really look at the behavioral and mindset aspect before you start diving into those other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I say the same thing, which is start small. It's important to keep the confidence in yourself, and you keep the confidence in yourself by making sure that you keep those small promises that you make. And so we do that by setting the bar low, and just making sure that we then hit those goals. And that's, like you say, how we build up that positive momentum. And that I think you use the word inertia, which I love. So after they've made the mental, commitment, and we figured out and identified what their why is, then what are some actionable strategies on everyday tips on how they can move forward?
Yeah, so once you've got those mental strategies in place, then it's really about starting the actions. So in terms of, like, it depends on what you want to do. So I don't like prescribing, for example, like weight training to everyone, even though I enjoy it, because some people might not like it. So it really, I think a lot of it's very individual. So again, if you like swimming, if you like cycling, if you like dancing, whatever physical activity that you enjoy doing, that's going to be sustainable long term. I think that's the one that you want to choose, because if you have an unhealthy relationship with exercise, for example, you hate every time you go to the gym, you dread it and you hate it. There's no way you're going to keep doing that long term. And that's where the issue is for a lot of people. And and unfortunately in the fitness industry, perpetuates a lot of that, where they say, you have to go to the gym to lose weight, but that's not necessarily true. And so a lot of it, I think, is about looking at it from a sustainability perspective, because it's really about long-term results, right? And that's what I focus on.
Awesome. So let's talk about breakfast. What should be the main components of our breakfast? How do we get our day started on the right foot? If let's say we're looking to lose body fat.
Yeah. So for this, I think give a more specific answer, because I think for anyone, regardless of your goals, a healthy breakfast should actually, the way I tell people is high protein, high fat, and high fiber. And then basically less on the carbohydrates. So it's actually opposite of conventional Western breakfast, right? So most people have, a bagel, have orange juice and sometimes oatmeal or cereal. And so, you're getting a lot of carbohydrates. And that's actually the opposite of what you want. So for fat loss, or even just general health, protein, fat, and fiber is the way to go. The reason being because the fiber will keep your blood sugar regulated, and so you won't have blood sugar swings and end up getting hungry by mid-morning. The other thing too is actually the hormone called cortisol. So it's a stress hormone that gets secreted in the morning when you first wake up, and by having breakfast that's higher in protein and fat and less in carbohydrates, it actually can help regulate your cortisol secretion, so you don't have dysregulated cortisol, which means basically some people, the cortisol will be low in the morning and high at nighttime. And so that's the opposite of what you want, because you want your stress hormone to come down at nighttime so you can calm down and relax and sleep. But then a lot of people have the issue where their cortisol is high at night, and they're what we call as tired and wired, where they're tired but they can't fall asleep. And part of the contribution and what can actually help with that is starting your day with a proper breakfast.
Wow. Well, so what is the biochemical reaction in the body as it relates to cortisol and carbohydrate intake?
So generally, if you have a high carbohydrate meal, it actually lowers your cortisol. For example, that's why some people actually recommend, you've heard of strength coach Charles Poliquin?
Yes.
He unfortunately recently passed away, but he was he was a guru of strength training and nutrition. And one of the things that I learned from him was he used to recommend to a lot of his athletes to have like a sweet potato, like 30 minutes or an hour before bed, because it helps to increases your tryptophan, and which can help you relax, but also lowers your cortisol. And so that can also help you calm down. So, and in the morning, you don't want the cortisol to be low. You actually want it to be high, because the cortisol gives you a kind of a burst of energy and, mobilizing sugar, and the regular cortisol secretion is usually highest in the morning and goes down throughout the day.
Wow. And so I know there's some days where I can relate to that, where at nighttime anyways, I feel absolutely just mentally fried, yet can't fall asleep. And I'm sure that there's a lot of listeners can relate with that, where maybe we're exhausted, but the brain is still going, or just that body adrenaline is still kind of there. Any like natural based supplements or anything besides a sweet potato that we can do to help kind of regulate that cortisol at night?
Yeah, for sure. There's the best one is actually called ashwagandha. And there's one brand specifically, KSM66. And the reason we recommend that is because it's a standardized extract. As you know, the issue with supplements, like here in Canada as well as the US, there's no agency that regulates it. So there can always be supplements that aren't good quality. So you want to make sure if you do get a supplement that it's highest purity and everything. And so there's one called KSM66, and it's basically a form of ashwagandha, which is a herb that's been shown to help regulate and normalize your cortisol. So basically, the way I use it personally, I take it post workout. I take it about 15 minutes. Had a call there. Sorry about that. So basically, I take it at nighttime, and what it does is it helps to lower my cortisol after my workout, and it helps me get to sleep easier.
So we want to lower the cortisol levels post-workout and before bed.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
If you work out in the morning, still you would want your cortisol to be lower after a workout, but before a workout, you actually want your cortisol to be higher, which is what, so that's why working out, some people use caffeine, and caffeine can actually give you a little spike of cortisol and energy, and obviously, so yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so now let's dive into something that's going to be a little bit more exciting for me and maybe some of the other listeners that are into the sports and the sports performance. Let's say you sit down with an athlete, maybe it's a collegiate level athlete that's getting ready to go to the pros, or maybe it's a bodybuilder that's looking to move up in their rankings and their placings. Walk us through kind of like what questions that you would ask them, or some actionable strategies that you could present to them if they're looking to improve their peak level performance.
Yeah, so from a performance strategy, the foundations are really what the key are. So nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress are the foundation, right? So first we go over those four things and make sure those are all in check, because it's funny, so many times with athletes, they're looking for like some secret supplement or some secret strategy, but then they're only sleeping 6 hours a night, or they're overtraining, and they don't realize that their body needs rest and recovery. So you have to make sure those things are in check first, and then you can move on to more more specific strategies on optimizing their performance. It's obviously sport dependent, but for a bodybuilder, for example, a lot of times what the best strategies I find to optimize everything is really just focusing on those basics. Like there isn't really any magical supplement or anything like that I would recommend. It's just kind of going through those things.
Awesome. And so how can what's the connection between our mind and our body, and how can we make sure that we are, handling stress? Maybe in your life, I'm sure you wear a lot of different hats and you train, and then obviously as a wellness professional and working with so many different people, I'm sure you get pulled in a million different directions. How do you recenter yourself, or how do you handle stress in your professional life where you're still able to get in a great workout or still balance your personal life? What are some
Yeah,
strategies that you use?
yeah, and I think for everyone it's going to be different. For me, I actually do find working out for me actually helps me mentally de-stress because I'm able to focus my energy and just able to release in the gym, and I find that helpful for me. But everyone's going to be different. I also personally I try to do meditation. I do about 10 minutes every morning, and I find that helpful as well. But it's going to be different for every person, and I think for a lot of people, they hear that one person says, "Oh, everyone should meditate," but I have had people where they find that they don't find meditation that helpful. So you have to find what works for you, and there's so many different ways to go about it. But having some sort of stress reduction strategy is very important. And I think one of the keys that I can one of the keys I can impart is there's something called the relaxation response. It's actually a physiological response, which again it helps to lower your cortisol. And so for a lot of people, that meditation can induce that response, but there is other ways to get that relaxation response. Whether that's going to like a spa or pet therapy, or just doing something with friends or family, something where you're actually actively relaxing. Where people are doing mindless things, where they're just in front of the TV and they just kind of turn off their mind. You're not going to get a relaxation response doing that. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you are looking for stress reduction strategies. It's trying to elicit that relaxation response.
Besides lowering of the cortisol levels, is there any other physiological change or hormones that get released when we found? And for me, it's working out as well.
Yeah.
I say working out as my psychologist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is there any other good hormones that get released when we do connect with whatever that positive outlet is for?
Yeah. There's oxytocin and dopamine, depending on the activity. But if you're doing a social activity, for example, or even, for example, with pets, if you're doing a pet, like pets can be great for that. And there's been so much research on that. They release oxytocin and dopamine, which is oxytocin is kind of the social bonding hormone, and then dopamine is kind of the feel good hormone or neurotransmitter. And so that can just help you make you feel better and help you have more connection with the person or pet or whatever activity you're doing.
So many times we look to take a step forward and think about what is it that I need to add in so that I can get to my goal. But it's also about what do I need to take away that's going to help just kind of lighten my load so that I can get towards my goal quicker. And ladies and gentlemen, I think what Dr. Khan is touching on here is cortisol. Cortisol is, while important in some ways, if we have too much of it, it can be a very nasty hormone and really take us away, take all that hard work away. And so
Yeah,
a
the
lot of
big
power.
issue. Yeah, exactly. The biggest issue is dysregulation. So some people have thrown out the word adrenal fatigue, and unfortunately, that's not a real thing. But I know a lot of people in the naturopathic world still perpetuate that. But there is something called hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction or dysregulation, which is essentially just a fancy way of saying that your cortisol levels are not are kind of out of whack in terms of timing. So like we talked about earlier, like instead of being low at nighttime, they're high at nighttime. So it's a dysregulation. That's the issue.
Wow. So maybe for the listeners, hey, do you feel tired in the morning, yet you come home at the end of a long day and you just can't fall asleep? that may be a warning sign that your cortisol levels are just dysregulated.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so common nowadays.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, the next thing that we're going to talk about is something that is very cutting edge that Dr. Khan is doing. And there's not a lot of wellness professionals that are doing this. So this is going to be something I'm very excited to talk about, which is PRP therapy and stem cell therapy. Can you share with the listeners what PRP therapy is? Because I know it's something that you utilize.
Yeah, it's just to give you a little background, I work at a clinic in Toronto called Gallia Clinic, and I work with his name is Dr. Anthony Gallia, and he was actually the first one in the world to do platelet-rich plasma, or PRP for short, for sports injuries. And he did it back in the late 90s. And so, because of that, we have a lot of expertise and experience with PRP, because I'm essentially working with the father, or the pioneer of PRP, and because of his reputation and because he was the one to pioneer it, we obviously treat a lot of high-profile athletes, and he treated Tiger Woods, Kobe Bryant, A-Rod from New York Yankees. So a lot of professional U.S. athletes who he treated, and the reason was because of PRP. So he was the first one doing it at the time. Now, of course, a lot of other people are doing it as well. So it's pretty ubiquitous. If you go to any orthopedic surgeon or sports clinic, they'll pretty much offer PRP. But originally when it started, he was a pioneer. And the reason why it got so much press and why the athletes all wanted it was because it's regenerative medicine. So this is different from, drug therapy, where you're just kind of suppressing something, or surgery where you're just kind of replacing something, or trying to repair it. Regenerative medicine, the big difference is that you're trying to use your own body's mechanisms to heal the tissue. And so that's really the key. And that's really the area that we're focusing on now, is how can we stimulate the response in your own body to heal its own tissue. So part of that is definitely through PRP, but it's also through optimizing your body hormonally as well as physiologically, so that your blood is healthy. And so that's where the lifestyle stuff comes in that we talked about earlier. So essentially the main reason why PRP is so helpful is what it does is it amplifies the platelets in your in your blood. So platelets, for example, if you get a cut on your hand, eventually you get scar tissue and it heals. And what causes that blood clot to form and healing are the platelets. And those platelets release growth factors. So when we amplify those platelets, and so the way we amplify them is we spin them in a centrifuge. So by amplifying it, it basically increases the number of platelets. So then you get more of the growth factors to heal tissue. And so that's why it's called platelet-rich plasma, because you have more platelets in the blood and the plasma. And so basically the platelets help to heal damaged tissue through the growth factors, but they also have some anti-inflammatory chemicals, so then they can reduce inflammation and pain as well, which is why we can use them in osteoarthritis, which is an inflammatory condition.
So imagine, ladies and gentlemen, a bus as opposed to a small car. The bus taking all of the positive healing nutrients and growth factors and the oxygen, and imagine delivering a bus full of healing versus a small car full of healing. Would you say that that's an analogy for the lay person as to how PRP helps?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so what are these growth factors in the most layman terms possible? What are these growth factors? These are hormones or?
So like one, for example, is called IGF-1, which is like insulin-like growth factor. And so they're not exactly hormones, but they're just, think of them as little signaling molecules. So basically they're messengers. And they send messages. Messages to the damaged tissue to help it heal. So think of them as signaling or messenger cells.
Awesome. Okay. So we've got a flood of these messenger cells going into the specific area more than what would be there. Our body is already going to have them there naturally, but now we're putting a flood of them into the area, and it's sending messages back to the brain saying, hey, we need to heal, or these um, things themselves are going to be doing the healing.
Yeah, so it's a local response. It's a local reaction due to the PRP. So it just sends so many signaling, so many growth factors that it helps it to heal.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm particularly looking, this is of particular interest to me, not only because I'm into bodybuilding and I see that you've done this on some elite level athletes in bodybuilding, but I have, was in a car accident and I actually have a partial tear in my rotator cuff.
Mm.
And so I am hoping to be able to do the PRP therapy, and that will heal the rotator cuff. Have you had any luck in that?
Yeah, we use it for rotator cuff all the time. The thing I would caution your listeners as well as you about is just to make sure that the injection is done with like an ultrasound guidance, so that they know exactly where they're injecting. And then the other big thing too is that all PRP is not made the same. So because it's become so popular nowadays, it is important to make sure you go to a reputable clinic or someone who has a lot of experience with it, because there are different types of PRP and there are different concentrations, and depending on the tear, you need different makeups. And so there's actually a whole science to PRP now, and there's so much research on it. And because we have like Dr. Gaia's and our clinic has a lot of experience with it, we kind of know the details of that, but a lot of clinics unfortunately don't. And so we do get patients all the time who went to another clinic and had PRP, but it never helped them. But it was the wrong type, or it wasn't for, or they didn't do it with an ultrasound guidance. And so, so you just have to make sure that those two things are looked at too.
Yeah, the ultrasound guidance that I saw on your Instagram page was incredible. That's just kind of like so that you can make sure that it's going directly into the tear, directly into the area that you want to heal.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, as opposed to it just go like how close do you need to get it to the area? Does it won't have the benefit if it's just
No, well, yeah, exactly. We want to make sure we get right into the tear. So
right.
we always aim, like, we have to be very precise when we inject.
Understood. And so the last thing that I want to touch on is the telemedicine and some of the amazing things that you're able to do. I think that it's really the future of health and wellness. Explain to the listeners a little bit about what telemedicine is and how you use it to expand the rate or the number or the geography of people it is that you can help, Dr. Khan.
Yeah, telemedicine is great because we're lucky because in Ontario we actually have what's called Ontario Telemedicine Network. So here in Canada, I can actually see any patient across Ontario, and it's covered through the government. So the patient doesn't have to pay a single thing if they're an Ontario resident. And so the way it works is it's just a video conference. And so for follow-up results or for discussions, it's so convenient. And for a lot of times with health and wellness stuff and weight loss, I do all that through telemedicine. And so I've seen patients, who are hundreds of kilometers or even thousands of kilometers away. And it's great. And I'm able to, do everything remotely. It really is going to keep growing with, especially as we get better technology, because, with not only artificial intelligence, but also with technology where people are able to have self-monitoring tools. For Apple, Amazon, and Google, they've all hired hired different physicians to help them, because they're all getting into the health field now, because self-monitoring tools are becoming a real thing now. And so, for example, recently the Apple Watch just released ECG. So you can get an ECG on your own. And then, so if you have telemedicine, you could just do the ECG, and then you could get the doctor to review it with you through telemedicine. And then, that way you save hours of otherwise work where you have to go to a doctor physically, they have to give you a requisition, and then you have to go to a lab, and then the tech has to do the ECG, and then you have to go back to the doctor, and then they have to review the results with you.
Yeah. I was in Best Buy a couple of years ago. I don't know if they had Best Buys in Canada, but I was in
Yeah,
Best Buy a couple of years ago, and I said, how much has your wearable device market expanded since 2010? And I think this was back in like 2016. And the individual said that there was about a 30% growth. And then in this holiday season, I was at the mall the other day, and I see I forget if it was J.C. Penney's or Macy's, one of those department stores, and I saw right next to the regular watches was this whole section of health and wellness wearable technology. That just wasn't around 5 years ago.
exactly. Yeah,
And so we can only imagine where we're going to be in another 5 years from today.
yeah.
So
It's just it's exploding, and I definitely think it's a good thing. It's just that the only thing is, a lot of times patients try to interpret the results themselves, and so we just have to make sure that patients have a practitioner they can work with who's able to help them guide them through it, right?
absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we have identified Dr. Khan as an expert in the health and wellness field, performance, weight loss, and overall health and wellness. Dr. Khan, where can the listeners get in touch with you? I don't know if this podcast has reached Canada yet, but hopefully it will. And for those local Ontario residents, how can they get in touch with you if they maybe can't?
Yeah, the best way is actually my Instagram page, which is just dr.akhan. So Akhan. And I have my contact information on there. And if anyone has any questions or wants to contact me, they can just direct message me or email me. And I'm usually pretty responsive. I have seen patients through telemedicine around the world. I've seen patients in Spain and India. I've seen patients like especially bodybuilders and stuff. So if people want to check that out, that's the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Khan, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you and change some lives together.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. All the best.
You too. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to my podcast. It means the world to me. I hope that you were able to take some things away from what we discussed here so that you can apply it to your life to become healthier and happier. Remember, every single day that you have greatness within you.